Hi, my name is Vivien Sharon, real estate broker with Sotheby's International Realty Canada. I'm very excited to welcome you to my series, Coffee with Vivien Live. So let me get my coffee and we're going to start. Today's episode is about the meaning of life, leaving a living legacy. In this episode of Coffee with Vivien Live, I'm very excited to have a special guest here today. Mallory McGrath is the founder and CEO of Viive Planning, which facilitates conversations and fosters an appreciation among family members for aging, end of life, and legacy planning. But before we continue, let me tell you a little bit about this series. In previous episodes, I spoke to a financial expert and writer for Forbes.com. Other topics included modern marriage from a legal viewpoint, the challenges seniors face with regard to housing and healthcare, interior design tips for 2021, how the environment affects property real estate values, classical learning from the comfort of your own home, smart homes technology, and most recently, how to write a book to increase your business sales. So Coffee with Vivien covers many topics of interest. It's a live show, and it covers interests to do with real estate, design, lifestyle, the environment, technology, culture, health, wellness, and more. So I am the author of the recently published book, The Boomer's 7-Step Guide to Downsizing, Overcoming Fear and Discovering Freedom. Here is my book, which came out just recently this year, and it is available on Amazon. And you could download it. You can see here, viviensharon.com/book. You can download it for free. And the goal is it has many tips and strategies to help adult children and their parents through the emotions of downsizing. And it's a book that really can help families who are going through lifestyle changes with aging parents as well. So today, our guest is Mallory McGrath, whose early career as a litigation law clerk made her develop a keen interest in estates and family dynamics. Her vision is to put families at the center of the planning process and to help harmonize that process by starting early and ensuring good communication among all loved ones involved along the way. So welcome, Mallory.
Thank you so much for having me, Vivien. I'm really looking forward to our talk.
This is exciting for sure, and you have a lot to share with us. So I'm just going to go over the 3 topics today in general that we're going to be discussing. The first topic is estate planning. How can families prepare ahead? Family conversations. At what age should one begin? And number 3, the gift of leaving a legacy, avoiding family conflicts. Mm-hmm. So Mallory, first off, do you have your coffee ready for a photo op? Let's hold it up. Let's see if I can hold it straight, which I can't. Okay, there we go.
I'll be honest, I'm drinking tea. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I wanted to make sure I had my warm beverage ready for a lovely chat.
Okay, sounds wonderful. That's great. And I managed to spill coffee, but that's okay. That's okay. Like on my pants, they're white.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, great.
Okay, so there we go. So we're going to begin now on a serious topic.
Okay.
How can families prepare most effectively for the aging and end-of-life process?
It's a big question. It's a loaded question because every family is so completely different in how they're made up. I think the important thing to keep in mind is that when I talk with a client, I'm always emphasizing how important it is that we're involving their family. And whether that be I'm talking to parents who have adult children, or I'm speaking with a single person with no kids who maybe has nieces and nephews and siblings around, it's really important to note that whatever your family makeup is, that those people close to you are the ones that should be a part of this process. So I really emphasize to clients how important it is to, yes, do those core estate planning items, right? Get your last will and testament, your continuing power of attorney for property, and your power of attorney for personal care. Make sure you've got a great financial advisor, an accountant helping you with tax planning, and making sure you have enough money to live the lifestyle that you want. But all of that is only so good if you haven't communicated that with your family. So for me, that's the big piece of the puzzle that I'm trying to bring into the traditional estate planning industry with my company, Viive Planning, is making sure that people understand that without that layer of communication, you could be leaving behind a family full of resentment, distrust, and misunderstanding about your wishes.
Totally agreed. And so we're going to break it up into a few areas to keep it simple for people to understand the process.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel having a will and powers of attorney, is that enough?
I don't think that's enough. I actually recently wrote a blog called A Valid Will versus an Effective Will. And a lot of times I'll be talking on this subject and people will say, but getting a will is important. And yes, 1,000%. Please, at the very least, go and do that. Because dying intestate, which means dying without having a last will and testament, is leaving a very heavy burden for your family if you have not created a last will and testament. So of course that is important. And of course it is important to have powers of attorney, both for property and personal care. But let's imagine for a second that you've got Bob, who's a 75-year-old man. His wife had predeceased him and he's got 3 kids. He goes and has a will made, great. He goes and has those powers of attorney made, great again. But let's say that he is in a car accident and finds himself incapacitated. The 3 kids all rush to the hospital. They have no idea if dad has a power of attorney for personal care. And once they actually find one, they find out that only one of the children was given that power. All of a sudden, you've caused a rift between 2 kids and 1, because one gets to decide if dad stays on life support and the other 2 don't. And they're in this situation where they're obviously terrified and feeling highly emotional because they might lose their father. And one person has to make a decision. And true, in some family situations, it wouldn't matter that only one has the official power and the 3 would talk and they'd come to a decision collectively and then one would sign the paperwork at a hospital. Mm-hmm. But I always say that grief and greed are a very unbeatable cocktail, whether a person is alive or a person has died. You don't want to leave your children and your loved ones with questions that they can't get answered because you're incapacitated or you've died. So it's best if when you have these documents drafted, you then send them by email to your family, because this is COVID, set up a Zoom call and be like, hey guys, here's all the choices I've made. It's not that you need to ask for their opinion on the choices and welcome it. You don't have to if you don't want to, but at least you've shared it. At least you have a record that they understand your wishes in case there's ever conflict in the future.
So it's clear that having a will and powers of attorney is not enough, but it's very important though that it is in place and that it does. I think that the thought is to include more than not just one child, but if you have several, to be very careful to realize that this can create potentially tremendous conflict, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but I guess that that's exactly the story you're talking about. So that is definitely the case. Now, before we continue, if anyone has any questions, we have the chat box here, and please enter your thoughts in the chat and we'll try and get to them as we go along. So another question, traditional estate planning is generally associated with a certain age bracket. For example, 50 to 60 plus, they're planning their estates because they're getting older and they see the future. Why is planning important for younger individuals?
Sure. So I think that when someone turns 18, they should get their first will. And a lot of people think, well, I don't have anything when I'm 18. Most 18-year-olds are still living at home. Maybe they're going to university. Maybe they're still in high school, quite frankly, and they don't have anything. But it's a rite of passage, just like turning 19 and getting to go to a bar for a first time. When you turn 18, you should go get your will, because you have ownership over your life and your possessions and your death at that point. No one gets to make choices but you, now that you're an adult. And I think what this past, 15 months now or so with COVID-19, what it's shown us as, there is illness, there is injury, there's devastation in the world that takes people long before they are 50, 60, 70, 80. And just because you're a young 20-something-year-old living it up with your first job in a city somewhere doesn't mean that you shouldn't be protecting the life and the assets that you have. A lot of times I'll talk with fellow millennials like myself who are, young with new families and whatnot, and they go out and get life insurance because you should, you get advice sometimes from real estate agents, make sure you have either mortgage insurance or life insurance just in case one of you had died to make sure the mortgage can be paid off. That is a great piece of advice. So we go out as young adults, young families, and get our life insurance policy. Well, how is that different from getting a will? How is that different from picking guardians for your kids? How is one thing more important than those other elements at a young age? And really, it's not. I think it's just, as a society, we view life insurance as something you get once you have something to lose, right? And so we need to protect it. But what people don't realize is having a will, having powers of attorney, making a plan for what happens to your children if you were to predecease them and they were still underage, these are equally as important and very, very important to make sure that millennials and Gen Xers are doing, just like our boomer and silent generation older counterparts.
I wonder how one educates the younger generation. They're so busy, like leading their lives, living their lives. They're young, never thinking of the future well beyond the next day or month or year, just to even get them in their headspace to think. I can recall growing up, it was the last thing I would have thought about. But I think we can discuss the milestones when one is in a relationship, when one gets married, when one starts having children, whatever age that may be. Certainly then one has to start getting things, if they haven't done it before, as a young single.
Yep, you would think that most people would catch on to that, like you just said. But the amount of older millennial, young Gen X couples that I speak to that have kids that are, not babies, not newborn little kids. I mean 8 to, teen age years, who are just maybe thinking they'll get a will for a first time. That's very common. And I think millennials, we're known as kind of starting the death positivity movement, not from the point of view that we welcome death, but more just that we are very accepting of this life journey, of this process. And so what I try to do when I'm speaking with my, my fellow millennials or younger Gen Xers is I try to say, we know this is going to happen. We don't know when. And yes, I hope that you live till you're 102. That sounds like a great plan. But there are so many illnesses out there that are taking people younger. Cancer and autoimmune diseases are on the rise. And we need to also take into fact that there are natural disasters in the world, and there are car accidents and boating accidents, and there's so many things that can happen to a person. And you, at the end of the day, want to make sure, whether it's your spouse, your children, or your parents, or whoever it is who is your close-knit hive of people that you provide, whether it be financial or emotional comfort and support for, you need to make sure that they're cared for. And so, yes, to your point, Vivien, it is very difficult to emphasize the importance to the younger generation. But I think a lot of times it's just that they haven't had it put in their face before. They haven't had the conversation. And once that's demonstrated to them, I find the majority of them come around to the idea and start working with someone on that.
And also, we have to realize that the younger generation, 18, and it's been pointed out here in the chat, thank you for that message here, that 18 plus, they've come into money. Some of them have inherited money, and they have to put something in place to protect themselves. So I guess you're totally right in changing our mindset to thinking the question was 50 to 60 plus should be thinking, no, it goes way back 18 plus when they become adults, when they become the adult age of 18 and older. So a question about yourself. How did you become interested and involved in end-of-life planning? It is interesting because you're a young millennial, and this is stereotypically, again, a question that it seems like this subject of end-of-life planning and life legacy would be for an older person who would be doing what you're doing. Maybe you can tell us why you're in this business.
Sure. So there were three sort of pillars that brought me to founding Viive Planning. The first, as you mentioned at the beginning, is that I worked as a litigation law clerk for a decade. And in doing so, I dealt with a lot of estate litigation. I worked with this one lawyer the whole time. And early on, he realized that I had an affinity for working with clients within that estate litigation realm. And I would go home at night just brokenhearted. I mean, by the time a family gets to an estate litigation stage, the family's broken. There's really no putting it back together. Yes, from a litigation standpoint, you might be able to resolve the issue somewhat amicably, but once a brother sues his sister or vice versa, there's no really getting that family back together again. And that was really hard for me. And so I started about 3 or 4 years ago looking back at case files and really trying to figure out, why did that happen? Why did this, this notice of application get issued? What really prompted that to happen? And a lot of times it was just a complete lack of communication from a parent to their children. And what we don't consider a lot, I think, is that even when a family is happy, even when you've got these boomer parents with their adult children, everyone gets along, there's, in-laws and grandkids and everybody's happy, that doesn't mean you'll stay happy. That doesn't mean that as parents, you can predict the people that your kids are going to be next month, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Things can happen to them that are going to change their view on their own life and on your life as you age. And so that's why it's so important that we are having these conversations up front. The second thing is that I come from a blended family. So my parents got divorced when I was 7. They both remarried. I have a sister from the first marriage with my parents, and then I have 2 half brothers who came from my dad and stepmother's marriage. And we all are from a very small town in Ontario. Everybody knows each other. Everybody gets along. It's wonderful, really. I always say I had a good divorce as if I had it myself, but I did. And I never felt greatly affected growing up as well as into my adulthood years. I never felt torn, but that doesn't mean it'll stay that way. And I'm very realistic to that we have to really work hard for all of us to get along, for all of us to make sure that we understand everybody's wishes. I mean, I have 4 parents of my own that I will care for as they age. And I've got 3 younger siblings who are going to have opinions and thoughts and views on what we do as a sibling unit to care for these parents. So as I was watching a lot of estate litigation files go across my desk with people just ripping apart their families, it's hard not to reflect on your own family and think, what if this happens to me? What would I want? And how could I help this? And then the third element was actually my own health. So I've been chronically ill since I was an early teenager, actually. And I went through my younger adult life, my 20s, these formative years being chronically ill. And I think that gives you a really different mindset. I think it gives you more wisdom, a more aged mindset maybe as well. And about 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with a condition that has put me into perimenopause. So at the age of 32, I started going through the menopausal process, which is kind of shocking considering I have 2 friends my age right now who are trying to get pregnant. So it's a really different mindset to be in as this phase of my life that shouldn't be, I'll use the word ending for lack of a better word, but shouldn't be ending at this point, should be ending 15, 20 years from now, is ending for me. And what I think that did, I was already building Viive at this point, but I think what it did is it gave me this whole empathetic view of the aging process that a millennial isn't going to have, because I'm aging actively in a way that someone in their early 50s as a woman in her early 50s is aging. And so that brought, I think, just a whole other level of understanding of the importance of planning, yes, for ends of life, but even more so for aging and what that looks like to a person's body as they go through that and how it impacts them socially and financially and whatnot.
Wow, that is quite an incredible story in the 3 pillars that motivated you to found this company, and you being at the helm. I think it's so inspiring, and you can relate to so many in all the age groups, which I think we're lacking in this industry. And that's why I want to find out more about the creation of your company and the process. But before that, there's a question that just came up about, does Viive Planning work with educational institutions to incorporate this subject as a topic in high school or college?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you to, is that Carmen who asked that?
Carmen.
Hi, Carmen, I see that now. I would love to. We'll start with that. I think it's important. I was actually having a conversation before our call today with a lawyer that I work with, we were talking about someone who is given the role of being an executor. There's a position of great power that we give to people, and there's no training or understanding as to how to do it. Yes. And I really do think there is, like many topics that are not introduced to children, older children, as they are going through the school system. I think it would be a very important thing, especially with the baby boomers being so many people as they are, for these younger generations to understand how to help them through the aging process and how to help with end of life and estate administration. So it's something I would be very passionate about and love to be involved in. So Carmen, if you know of something, please feel free to reach out to me.
I think education is really important. Even the educator, or I should say the estate planner, or the executor. No, the executor, that's what they're called now, right? The executor needs to know what is their role. You say they have a lot of power. Many times one names an executor because they're a family member who is very trusted. They're a lawyer, they're an accountant, and they're of a certain age. In a way, it's ageism. You don't want to have an executor be too old, because if they're 70 plus, yet they've practiced all their life in their business, they may be too, you want someone younger who could potentially help you as well throughout the process. And there is a course that you've taken, the Certified Executors Administration courses, I believe, or that's out there for people to learn more.
Yeah, it's called the Certified Executor Advisor.
Yes.
And so it's an added credentials, added training for various industry professionals. I was actually the first law clerk to ever take it, because when I went to go register, they ask you to pick your profession, right? And there's a wide range of professions that actually touch on the estate planning industry and estate administration industry. And law clerk wasn't there. And so I had to call and say, hi, I'd like to do this. And they, of course, welcomed it. But yeah, it was a very informative course. And so it is a service that we provide at Viive. After having worked with families for years, there's going to inevitably be an estate administration. And knowing that we know everything there is to know about the assets, liabilities, and the family, we can help them through that estate administration process as well. So it's sort of like an added service.
It is. And you have that as well through your training. So let's talk about the process. How do people and families get together? I think that there are some families that just might be old school, but let's say the patriarchs and the matriarchs, depending on their background, don't want to talk about the end of life and the legacy and how much money they have and how the properties they have, and divulge anything to their kids. They're of the background that this is not for them to know. So how does that really, that's not great. The kids then who are boomer kids or whatever age they are, they don't have a clue what's going to be in store later. So how do families start this process? What do you see and what do you recommend at the kitchen table? Like, who sits there and how do you do this?
Exactly. So let's as an example, because I give differing thoughts and views on this topic depending who's talking to me. So let's imagine that it's so shall we say, the boomer children, right? So these are people in the millennial Gen X age bracket who come to me and say, I need to understand what mom and dad want to do with their assets, what they want to do with their estates. So one of the first things I do is I use my daughter as an example. I say, let's imagine my daughter doesn't want to eat broccoli. If I put it on her plate every day and get angry with her because she doesn't eat it, in what world is she going to sit down and eat the broccoli? Whereas if I put it on her plate and just leave it there and go about dinner, talking about our days, and it keeps getting put on her plate and she probably doesn't eat it, 9 times out of 10, a couple times down the road, she's going to pick it up and she's going to eat it. because I haven't aggravated her about it. I haven't pushed the information and the whatnot down her throat. And so I use that as an example with the boomer children. And I say, if you want your parents to communicate with you about their life and their assets, then you need to do that. So you need to go out and start planning. You need to get your will, your powers of attorney. You need to provide them with copies. You need to sit down and talk to them about your wishes for your life if something were to happen to you. Start that conversation. Show them that you can be open, responsible, respectful of wishes and not nagging and whatnot. And allow them to see by demonstration that this can be a very welcoming and open conversation topic. And yes, it's not fun. No one looks forward to these talks, I don't think. But you open a bottle of wine, you sit around the kitchen table, and you just get it done. And if anything, you'll probably end up laughing a lot at the awkwardness of it, making, uncomfortable end of life jokes, which happen, right? Things like that. It'll be difficult, but the more you do anything, the easier it becomes. And if you can have that conversation earlier when your boomer parents are healthy and active and living these great lifestyles, as opposed to 5, 10, 15 years down the line when they are not, and they're really trying to hold on to their life as much as they can and their freedom and independence, that's going to be a lot harder. Whereas if you've set up that groundwork, right? You've set up that conversation as being a normal thing for your family to have, it will make it so much easier once your parents are much more actively aging and progressing through that process of the last, shall we say, 10, 20 years of their life.
And also one wants to avoid family problems later, family wars later, sibling jealousies or rivalries that do come up when things are not discussed. And it's always about money, and it's always about if there's properties or multiple assets. So things get complicated. So you're saying that the onus, if the parents, the older generation or whatever, the older school, that they don't want to say anything, it would be up to the younger generation to have an open conversation, to make it more relaxed, to take the lead, which is very interesting. Now we have a really great question again from Carmen. Thank you.
Okay.
She's asking you, Mallory, do you also cover the option of donating organs with untimely death? I know she says it's a sensitive topic.
So when I work with clients, we go through a lot. I think what sets Viive apart from other traditional estate planning professionals is that I'm not trying to achieve one objective. I'm not trying to write legal documents. I'm not trying to help with avoiding probate fees. I'm not trying to help make sure you have enough money to live in your condo till you're 100, right? That I'm looking at those items, but those are not my direct focus. So I look at the very whole holistic view of a person's aging life. So when we talk about the aging process, we talk about, okay, what happens if you get Alzheimer's? What's that going to look like for you? Would you like to live at home? Do you want your partner to be the one caring for you? Do you want to bring in a PSW? Let's say you find out you've got stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Would you like to go to a hospice? Would you like to die at home? Would you like to die in a hospital? And then, yes, as well, just like Carmen said, we get into end of life choices. Would you like to be buried, cremated? Have you purchased a plot? Do you want an end of life ceremony, whether it be religious or not? Do you want to donate your organs? Do you have a DNR? All these questions are asked, and I put them to every client, whether, trust me, they want to hear them or not. The questions are put there, and everyone has the right to say, don't want to talk about it, or more times out of not, I find people take it away and then come back with really sometimes surprising for me responses to the questions that are asked, because they just never been asked it straight out before. It's not like you sit down at a dinner party and go, hey, Vivien, what are you doing with your organs when you die? It's not something we talk about. It's not a normal thing to discuss. And a lot of times I think it's just that people haven't been given the permission to think about it, because we view death and aging as negative. But it's not. It's all a part of this life journey that we've had. And so making these conversations just more readily accessible and more acceptable in our society, I think, is really what the younger generations need to do, so that we can help the boomers go through this wonderful part of their life.
Really, really interesting work that you do. So we're slowly coming to the end. I have a few things I still want to cover, though. So Could you just tell us in a nutshell, what is the process step one or phase 1, 2, 3, 4 that you discuss in your business and on your website, to create a plan for the family? How does it work?
I will try to sum it up as quickly as possible. So phase 1, we call our aging and end of life plan. And this is definitely the most fulsome and big workload part, because it's not just work for me and the people at Viive, it is work for the clients as well. So we've partnered with a great organization called Side Drawer, which is an online cloud-based storage system. So fantastic. And we've been working with them, and it's been really great to see. So anything that is sent, I don't deal with paper at all at my office. Absolutely everything is uploaded and saved to a secure Canadian-based cloud system so that access can be given to executors, to powers of attorney when the time comes. And as I said before, it's a very holistic view of every element of a person's life and business, if that's applicable. And all of that is put into their aging and end of life plan, which is presented to them at the end of phase 1. Phase 2 is connection to trusted partners, just like you, Vivien. So in their aging and end of life plan, we make the recommendations for trusted partners. So if they want to take that and go handle it all on their own, 100% okay. That's fine. 9 times out of 10, people don't take that route, and instead they go, Mallory, you just know everything now. Can you just take care of it? And then we can facilitate these interactions, right? If it was a boomer looking to downsize, I'd say, I've got this great agent, Vivien, she's awesome. Can I go chat with her about your situation? I'd be able to give you all that info that you need to be able to walk in and do your job as quickly and efficiently as possible. And then you can go and be your brilliant self and sell their home and help them find their downsizing dream, right? And then the third phase is a collaborative meeting. So I'm very upfront with clients when they're vetting me and we're talking about whether or not we enter into a contract together. I say it's important that you understand that our service model includes this. And this is, I mean, if someone says no, that's okay. But we really want to make sure people get how important it is to share everything we've done with their family. And yes, people are different in what they want to say. Some people don't like to use numbers. They don't want their kids to know that they have $10 million socked away somewhere. That's cool. It's easy enough to just pretend that mom and dad only have $100,000, but at least explain where the money is and how to get to it and how much is going to who. You just use percentages. And at the end of the day, everyone at least can have an understanding. And we can videotape these meetings. So it adds an added layer of insurance if there were to be disagreements or even costly litigation in the future. And then our fourth phase is a periodic review. So a lot of times people go through this process and they think, okay, at least I'm done now and I never have to do this again. But as you know, life evolves and these legal documents that have been drafted need to be fluid and change as you progress through your life. But a lot of times people, it's very easy to forget to do it because we don't want to do it. So we just allow it to lapse in our brain. But that's where we can come in. So depending on the age and health and well-being of a client, we decide on a length of time that a review should take place. So with a typical healthy boomer, it's usually a 2-year period. If I'm dealing with an 85-year-old, it's probably 6 months to 12 months. If I'm dealing with a millennial, it could be up to 5 years, depending on where they're at in their life. But it leaves the onus on Viive to make sure that everything is up to date at all times.
Sounds like an amazing plan that you have put together, and you really, really have to be commended for what you're doing. I'm just so impressed. I really am.
Thank you, Vivien. That really means a lot coming from you. You're such a force in the boomer industry, and I'm so happy that you're one of our trusted partners. It means a lot.
Thank you. So one last question. Leaving a legacy puts a stamp on the future and makes a contribution to future generations. In a short little answer, what do you think, or why is that important, leaving a legacy?
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question. Short answer. I think that the whole world, forget about our specific society, the whole world has their own traditions to pass down, their own views, their own opinions and whatnot. And if we can't provide that information and that emotional connection and pass it on to each generation, then you start to lose the very elements that make us humans, that give us this beautiful sense of humanity. And I think that even within a core family, passing on a legacy, whether that be financial, whether that be stories or mementos or whatever, being able to pass that on to your loved ones, that is such a beautiful right to have, to be able to do that. To be able to know, that my daughter is going to have this ring that has been passed down to the eldest females in 4 generations now in my family, right? Like, that's legacy, passing on something, whether it be tangible or not. And I think it's what makes us human. It's the most important thing I think we can do, is pass that on to the next generation.
Maintaining a life legacy and for future generations. Beautiful way to end the conversation.
Yeah.
So Mallory, how do people get in touch with you?
Wonderful. People can head over to my website, www.viiveplanning.ca. Viive is spelled with 2 I's, like 2 people working together. So you can head on over there. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. We're everywhere. And you can reach out to us there. Head on over to our website, actually, and you can learn a bit more about me. And you can also check out our frequently asked questions. We've got a lot of options there, as well as the Viive POV. That's our blog. And it's not just me writing, our trusted partners write, as well as some other guests. And you can see some really interesting topics. Our most recent one was about the social media will that Epilogue and Sharon Hartung created. And there's that one I referenced earlier, the valid will versus an effective will. That's a great one as well. So people can learn more about how to communicate with their families.
Look at all the interesting topics. Well, we can see this very, very robust website that you have that will really help people along the way. I think that is, and people to sign up for your blog and go through all the various drop downs that you have. That's great. So we now know how to get in touch with you. And well, this ends our episode for today. I think we could have gone on and on. I'll be honest with you. It's very, very interesting. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today. And in the next episode of Coffee with Vivien Live will take place in 2 weeks on Wednesday, June the 9th. We will feature Dr. Vivien Brown, who has just launched her newest book, The New Women's Guide to Healthy Aging, 8 Proven Ways to Keep Vibrant, Happy, and Strong. And I have her book right here. So we will be speaking to Dr. Vivien Brown. I want to remind you that you can follow me and this series on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and on my website, viviensharon.com. or viviensharon.com/live. And please like this video, leave a comment if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. So bye for now.
Bye. Thanks, Vivien.
Thank you so much, Mallory. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too.